Hello, my name is Andy and I am the Village Idiot. I'm armed with a car and a GoPro and an unhealthy amount of time on my hands. I'm using that time to attempt to visit every civil parish in England. You're watching the Amber Valley series. There are 35 parishes in this beautiful slice of eastern Derbyshire. Here's one for your viewing pleasure. Welcome back to Amber Valley again, folks, and to the biggest one I've done so far in this part of Derbyshire. This place is right on the A38 and on the M1 as well, so it's very important for transport links. This is the beautiful town of Alfreton. Here's my disclaimer for people who may be watching me for the first time. I say things as I would in my native accent and dialect. As a result, I may not pronounce things in the same way as the locals do. Remember, I'm a visitor. It's impossible to know everything. Leave me a comment, spin me a like and bash that subscribe button. Let's get to today's parish video. Alfreton, Alfred's town. Welcome to the largest one I've covered so far in Amber Valley and to a place that's got history at seemingly every turn. This is Alfreton, and yes, before anyone tries to argue, Alfreton is the correct way to pronounce it. The locals may refer to it in Derbyshire dialect as Alfreton or even the shortened version, often, but these are theoretically incorrect because the town takes its name from King Alfred, who it's believed founded the original settlement. And speaking of that original settlement, it was sited at the top of a hill with a commanding view into the Derbyshire valleys below. Trust me when I tell you, folks, any route that involves walking into the town centre here requires a lot of Weetabix in the morning, because atop that hill is still very much where Alfreton's main activities take place. Once again, it's another Amber Valley location with coal mining and heavy industry in its past, but the modern town is much more than just a place for all those workers to hang their hats. It has a thriving town centre with loads of shops, both chain and independent, a glorious park which used to belong to its hall, and a football club which once had an England goalkeeper on its books. Get ready for a near 3-hour marathon around one of Derbyshire's lesser known towns. It's brilliant, this place. I love it. Let's go. Before we get going, there are two things this exceptionally long route doesn't pass. One of them is this building. The locals know this as the House of Confinement. It stands on King Street and it's an unusually large village lockup. It was used to house vagrants before they appeared before the local magistrates. It's almost exactly the same as another one in Derbyshire, which can be seen in the town of Wirksworth. Made of stone and built in the 1820s, this is easily one of the most distinctive buildings anywhere in Alfreton, despite looking rather shabby. It has two cells, one for men and one for women. The other thing we won't pass is this milepost. When turnpikes crisscrossed the land, there was a legal requirement on companies to provide milestones. This resulted in a local curiosity. This cast iron marker at the end of the Alfreton to Nottingham turnpike has the notation Alfreton 0 miles. Talk about stating the bleeding obvious. It's believed to be the only milepost of its kind anywhere in Derbyshire. We start at the Watchorn Memorial Church, one of the grandest primitive church buildings this channel has ever seen. It was founded in memory of Alice Watchorn in 1927. Her son Robert was one of the most important Alfreton natives ever. Born in 1859, he was a wealthy philanthropist who worked as an immigration commissioner at both Ellis Island in New York Harbour and at the US-Canada border. Watchorn Park lies opposite, and that will be our end point later. Let's go up Park Street, where straight away we'll get a feel for what's to come. Here's a pub, the Miners' Arms. You shouldn't need me to explain why this is so named, but I will anyway. Alfreton was a mining town. On the other side of the road is the local Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses, but aside from these, Park Street is a residential affair. These terraces would have been mine workers' houses at one time, as would the ones in Alfred Street. This one is of course named after King Alfred, who it's believed founded Alfreton. The earliest record of the place dates back to 1004 AD, where it was named Alfredingtune. Grange Street has a couple of landmarks. The Alfreton and District Memorial Hall is one, and located directly opposite is the local branch of Ashbourne Day Nurseries. All of this is on the southern fringe of the town centre, but before we get there, there's loads more to cover. Alfreton has a number of schools. One of these is the David Nieper Academy, originally opened in 1939. At that time it was named Mortimer Wilson School after a local lawyer, businessman and chairman of the County Education Committee. We'll touch more on its new name later. At the end of the road you hit a park, and alongside it is the Impact Arena. This is the home ground of Alfreton Town Football Club. They were created in 1959 after the merger of two former clubs, Alfreton United and Alfreton Miners' Welfare. An original Alfreton town had played in the Midland League in the 1920s. Nicknamed the Reds, the town's team play in the National League North, the sixth tier of football in England. On the wall of one of the stands that surround their ground is a brief history, and this even tells you about some of their former players. And Alfreton Town have had some famous players on their books, including England goalkeeper Jordan Pickford, played 12 games in the 2012-13 season for Alfreton Town. Next to the ground you'll find this building. That's the Alfreton Town Supporters and Social Club on North Street. By following that road we come to the B600, part of the Alfreton to Nottingham Turnpike, which we covered at length in the Summercoats episode. Where the two roads meet is a Roman Catholic church, the first in the world ever to be dedicated to Christ the King. It was built in 1927, but its attractive original design was overlaid in 1992. Before this existed, Catholics had a small building on Park Street, which dated from 1883. Following the old turnpike for a while, we come to a one-stop where the B600 bends southwards towards Summercoats. It was at this point centuries ago where the original road between Alfreton and Nottingham swerved eastwards, running along the beautifully named Flowery Lees Lane. It then turned and crossed Coates Park and ran through Birchwood before emerging at Pye Bridge. To look at Flowery Lees Lane now, you simply couldn't guess that particular piece of history. It's now just a normal, quiet suburban street with not a lot to speak of. It does have one landmark though, Lees Junior School, one of two in the town. There are also two infant schools we'll meet later. Beside the school is a path that runs into a wooded area. This is known as Outseats Farm. You'll notice the ground in these parts is very uneven. There are two reasons why. In 2018, the remains of 5 farm buildings from the 18th century Outseats Farm complex were found here. Later, when coal was king in these parts, 2 major seams ran under this area, both of which were mined by Coates Park and Alfreton collieries. A brand new housing estate now occupies the site of Outseats Farm, and this, complete with a balancing lagoon, stands directly to the south of the former Alfreton colliery. To get to that we have to follow Ormonia Way, which leads to a roundabout on Mansfield Road. In the 18th century, Alfreton was the chief coal mining centre in Derbyshire, and its prosperity meant it was the 3rd largest town in the county. The pit closed in the late 1960s, and its site has now been reclaimed for other industrial developments. It was served by the railway, and that's still here. Although the spur which linked the colliery to the railway network has been built over, Alfreton still sees regular trains. Alfreton railway station was originally closed in 1967 as part of the Beaching Acts, but in 1973 it was reopened again on the same site. It was initially named Alfreton and Mansfield Parkway. Mansfield regained its own station in the 1990s, meaning this became Alfreton once again. In 2021, the station lost its direct services to and from London, but from here you can reach Nottingham and Leeds and cities as far away as Liverpool and Norwich. This next section of the walk follows Mansfield Road, uphill and almost into the town centre. In doing so, we're skirting the southern edge of the old colliery. Incidentally, as well as coal, Alfreton was quite famous locally for the quality of its rope making. It was, after all, an industry allied to mining. Halfway up the hill we find the Station Hotel. This is no longer in business, but when it was operated by James Hole & Company. That name sounds familiar because we spoke about both him and his Castle Brewery back in the Newark episode last year. One thing you might notice about Alfreton would be the wicked number of speed cameras in and around it. That one is just before you get to the Meadows care home. Set over 2 buildings, this is operated by Milford Care and it's surrounded by some lovely landscape gardens. Now the town centre is starting to appear in the distance, but there's still a few more landmarks to catch first. Next, we're going to turn left down the bendy Ellesmere Avenue. At the end of this street, there are 2 chapels, one that's active and one that's not anymore. The active one is Alfreton's Wesleyan Methodist Church. This was opened in 1983 by its 2 oldest lady members, Maggie Auckland and Lily Warren. Directly opposite is a former primitive chapel which opened in 1881 and closed in 1970. The town's Methodist tradition stretches way back to the 19th century. The first Wesleyan church was built in 1809 on Chapel Street in the town centre. These 2 stand close to Orange Street, where David Nieper is located. As well as providing the name for the local school we met earlier, this business makes luxury women's clothing. This next section is full of pubs, both open and closed. The Doghouse is one of the latter. It used to be the Gate Inn. I suspect too that this was once a pub, but what this was I don't know. These days it's a Chinese restaurant called Diamond City. Just up the road from those 2 is the Plough Inn, and this one's still very much open. All these pubs being located within such a short span makes sense because we're following the route of the former Alfreton to Nottingham Turnpike. At one time, Alfreton would have had loads of coaching inns for loads of travellers. Next, I cut a corner by using the car park of this little supermarket in order to reach the end of Firs Avenue. This next part is mainly housing, so that's the ideal time to throw in some famous names, people who were born right here in Alfreton. They include children's clothes producer William Carter, the co-founder of the Butterley Company Benjamin Outram, and the landscape painter Norman Whitehead, whose works are on display at the Erewash Museum in Ilkeston. And of course, on top of those, we already know about Robert Watchorn too. Here's a playground for the local children, named Rogers Lane Park. This one's ideally placed because there are 2 schools in this area, namely Copthorne Community Infant School and Christ the King Voluntary Academy at the end of Firs Avenue. In the distance from here, you'll often see cranes reaching high into the sky. Nothing's being built though, that's G.H. Johnson, a crane hire business at the western end of the former colliery site. This part of town may be dominated by residential streets, but one of them leads to a massive local landmark, and that's where we're going now. This is Charles Street, and at the end of it there's an access point to Alfreton Cemetery. Founded as a burial ground in 1891, it covers 4.5 acres. In much the same way as the one at Leabrooks, it was initially managed by a burial board, this time consisting of 6 members. 2 buildings stand out here. This one is a toilet block, which in my experience is a very unusual thing to find in a British cemetery. The other is the old mortuary chapel, which is now the Alfreton Heritage Centre. This is open every Sunday between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m. Okay, so everything so far has been on the fringes of the town centre. We're now about to enter the town centre. And one good thing about that is it means that the ground is going to be flat, because so far everything's been either uphill or downhill. And trust me, in a headwind, it can be very, very difficult to try and walk around, but I've got here. So things are about to go up a notch. Let's see what Alfreton town centre's like. Our first landmark in the town centre comes in the form of Alfreton House. This gorgeous building is one of the oldest in the town, dating as it does from around 1650. It was originally a farmhouse and it had a lawn and some fine beech trees. It provides an attractive feature at the end of the main high street shopping area. Usage-wise, it's in the possession of Amber Valley Borough Council. Apart from housing various offices, including that of the Town Council located in an upstairs room, it plays host to the delightful Alfreton House tea rooms too. On the other side of the road is the Crossroads Tavern Ale House, which occupies part of the former Alfreton Town Hall, a majestic building from which you can get a great view down the busy high street. We're going to work our way towards that shortly, but first we're going down Cressy Road. Alfreton's town centre is a small rectangle, bounded by this, the High Street, King Street and Hall Street, and it's crossed by a collection of public footways with shops at every turn. Cressy Road has the least in terms of facilities, but it does have this dentist. At the end of the street, these look like modern offices. In fact, that's Maple Mews, a collection of 52 self-contained two-bed apartments with a range of facilities for people aged 55 and over. It even has a cafe open to the public. Down Hall Street we go now, but not for long. Our next job is to walk through 7 Square back towards the High Street. This is a car park mainly, but it's often the venue for many an Alfreton event. It has a few bits of interest, and one such for the local shopper would be the Chatterbox Café, open 7 days a week. Alfreton Library and Information Centre can be found on 7 Square as well, which is open daily. The town has a branch of Pound Stretcher, which you can see on your screens now. This is located at the end of Central Road, one of the many narrow streets and alleys that run between 7 Square and the High Street. I'd liken this setup to that of a rabbit warren. At the end of this particular thoroughfare is the modern post office. Years back, the post office used to be located within the town hall building, which we saw a few moments ago. It would be a little difficult to list every single shop you can find in the town centre because there's lots of them. Alfreton is a nice mix when it comes to retail. There are both chain stores and independent traders. There are cafes, food stores, jewellery shops, pet shops and everything else in between. There are pubs too. This here is the King Alfred Hotel, which takes its name from the very same royal figure who, it's believed by many, founded the town. This 1930s building stands on the site of the former Travellers' Rest Inn at the junction with Chapel Street. Probably more of interest to the locals than visitors, this is the Bingham Memorial Fountain. It was built to commemorate the work of a local doctor, Joseph Bingham, who practiced in the town for 40 years in the latter half of the 19th century. It can be found in the same square as the King Alfred Hotel. From here we go down Chapel Street and via some handy little linkways we'll find ourselves again in 7 Square in a moment, this time around the back of Poundland. If you follow the walkway around this, you'll be standing at the foot of Institute Lane, looking up a shallow hill. At this point, 7 Square has a small parade of shops, including one of Alfreton's most popular restaurants, Naughty But Nice. Institute Lane is a shallow hill and it's pedestrianised. It has a lot of household names along its length, but what attracts people to this part of town would be the Market Hall. This does not stand on the original location of Alfreton's market. We'll get to that later. The current building hosts an indoor market on Tuesdays, Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays. I was therefore unlucky, as today was a Wednesday. We continue up Institute Lane, checking out the local shops. I can only imagine how this might have looked many years ago. It certainly wouldn't have been like this. Most of the buildings along here are classic 1960s, 70s or 80s. Before long, we're back to the High Street once again, and next up is another pub, the Blue Bell. This is a traditional inn and it's known for being a sports pub, often frequented by supporters of Derby County. I'll apologise now to any Nottingham Forest fans who might be watching. This pub ain't for you. It also has a small restaurant too. Across the road is the Banker's Tavern, a micro pub which reopened last year after a period of closure. New Street is next, and this will take us around the back of the market hall. That ramp you can see there leads to a rooftop car park that overlooks Seven Square. You don't see many of those these days. Back to Hall Street now, where we find Millfield House. This contains Derbyshire's Sexual Assault Referral Centre, run by Mountain Healthcare. Next door is the car park for the Palmer Morewood Memorial Social Club. The Palmer Morewood family were the last owners of Alfreton Hall, a building still to come. The last member died in 1957. We've reached the bus station now, and as you can see, it's busy. Countless buses run from here to places like Nottingham, Chesterfield, Derby, Mansfield, Matlock, and everywhere else in between. Given this area has a high footfall, it's the ideal place for a parish notice board. Tick it off, folks, there's 6 left in Amber Valley. At about turn now towards Alfreton's Tesco, which features a communal piano in its lobby. Okay, so after a little break in the Tesco cafe, we're on to the final part of this walk now. There's not a great deal left. All that's left really is we need to turn right here and go up the hill towards the church, and then past the church and through Alfreton Park, which is behind these houses here, and that'll take us back to the start. As big as Alfreton has got these days, you can't overlook where it all began in medieval times. This is King Street, and it was at the top of this steep hill where the original Alfreton settlement was. It was centred on a small marketplace and an ancient meeting hall. Let's head for those now. In doing so, we pass the job centre and the Four Horseshoes pub, which is permanently closed. There's an urban explorer of this pub elsewhere on YouTube, go check it out. King Street also has a raft of smaller independent shops, and halfway up the hill there's a Wetherspoons too. This is the Wagon and Horses, which, like most Wetherspoons pubs, has quite a storied past. It originated as an inn and got its name thanks to the horse fair which was held in the marketplace. It became a cafe bar in the 1990s, but Wetherspoons restored this part of Alfreton history in 2003. Now we're coming into the marketplace. On the left is JF Neville's, a gun shop which has been one of Derbyshire's leading suppliers for more than 40 years. Alfreton's original market charter was granted in 1251, and a market was held here every Monday. You would really struggle to fit the entire history of Alfreton onto one information board, but there's a potted version of it here. Standing tall over that board is the War Memorial, a bronze figure of a World War I soldier. This has 161 names on it, 121 from World War I and 40 from World War II. It's an ideal spot for it if you ask me, because it stands right in the old centre of civilization. However, Alfreton wasn't just about this marketplace in medieval times. Let's take a left turn now and head towards what is the oldest building the town has, St Martin's Church. Church Street has a few interesting bits. This here is J.M. Warwick's former auction house, which is now a block of flats. Next up is a church, but this is not St Martin's. This rectangular structure with a tower and a small turret is the former Wycliffe Congregational Church, and it was built in 1850. The New Life Church group still meet there apparently. Directly opposite is the old vicarage hiding away behind a wall and some very lush green trees, and then the road forks into 2 pieces. They split at what was a 19th century gate lodge, a Grade 2 listed building. If you take the right fork, you'll reach St Martin's Church. Parts of this go back to at least the year 1200. St Martin's was first recorded at the endowment of Beechief Abbey between 1172 and 1176, so it's reasonable to assume both had the same founder. The oldest part appears to be a stilted archway from the nave into its tower. There's clear evidence of the decorated period in some of the arches separating the nave from the south aisle. The tower is early perpendicular and 15th century. It contains 2 bells, one from 1780 and the other from the 16th century. In 1868, the church was enlarged and altered. The chancel was almost completely rebuilt and extended to retain its former size. The churchyard is interesting. Here I found what looked like an ancient crypt squirreled away in one corner. When this church was founded, Alfreton was all about agriculture. Farming is less important now, but in this part of town you can still see some evidence of agricultural activity. This farm beside the church stands on the site of the original Alfreton Hall or Manor House. The current hall is also around here, although it's not as big as it used to be. In 1964, the former Alfreton Urban District Council bought 4 acres of land that used to belong to the Hall's vast swathe of parkland. This was to build the original Alfreton Leisure Centre, which was constructed in the 1970s. The current building is a state-of-the-art facility offering a gym, a sports hall, a swimming pool and much more. Next door, on a piece of former parkland as well, is the town's massive health centre, which was added in 2007. This serves in excess of 10,000 patients and has both private and NHS dental services, as well as an on-site pharmacy. So what of the hall itself then? Well, part of it still stands, as does this old stable block nearby. It was built in 1724 by Roland Morewood, with an additional wing added in 1855. This made it a very substantial property. Most of the house was demolished though in 1968, having been substantially weakened by mining subsidence. The 1855 extension on your screens now carries a Grade 2 listing, and it's now an arts and adult education centre. Opposite we have the Polygon Centre, which is essentially a youth club, but in reality it's a bit more than that. Although the Hall's parkland has had some things built on it, most of it is still as attractive as it always was. It became a massive public park and now has some facilities for the disabled. This building is a hydrotherapy pool. Built in 2017 and opened by Paralympian Charlotte Henshaw, this forms part of Alfreton Park Community Special School. It's named after Margaret Clark, a swimming teacher who, with the support of parents, raised over £58,000 for its construction. Nearby is the Parkwood Day Centre for adults with learning disabilities. The building down this track is a care home, again for those with disabilities. It's called the Morewood Centre, carrying the name of Alfreton Hall's former owners. The park features a cricket club too, and here that is. Alfreton Cricket Club was founded in 1927 and it has 4 sides that compete in the local leagues, as well as a women's softball team and a successful junior section. From here, all that remains was to make my way across the park's 90 gorgeous acres of Derbyshire landscape and back to where this all began. And after walking through the park and up these steps, we're greeted with the welcome sight of Wesleyan Church, which is where we began almost 2.5 hours ago. Now there's one last landmark that I do want to talk about, and it's this bus shelter here. I noticed this right at the beginning of the route and I thought it was worth a mention. There you go, that's why. There's the plaque. Wow. So there you are, that's been Alfreton. We've been all the way around it, and you know what, for a 2.5 hour walk I don't think I've done too bad, quite frankly. I really don't. Only one thing left to do, and that's drive out using the A38 to go home. Alfreton is a handy town these days for logistics companies. This is the A38, which the place literally stands on. This leads to the M1 at junction 28, and as we already know, that's a major point on the UK's motorway network. Several businesses have set up shop in Alfreton because it's so easy to hit the road from it. Amber Valley is down to 6, 4 big and 2 small. We'll be back in a couple of weeks because next time we're off elsewhere in Derbyshire to play a strange variant of football. See you there. Thanks for watching this video, folks. Don't forget to like this episode if you haven't already. It really makes a difference with YouTube. If you're new here, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us a share too if you've got friends who'd like it. You can find all the links to my social media accounts below, as well as my Buy Me a Coffee page where you can donate to the channel. Also, if you've enjoyed this episode, have a look at some more videos in this series. Until next time, I've been Andy, also known as the Village Idiot, and I'm out.